Hello and welcome to another episode of Invis Funding, Meet the Founder. And today we're with Paul Gidley. I'm Jamie Harford. I'm the CEO of Invis Funding. And we help companies get ready for fundraising rounds by building documents, investor outreach programs, and et cetera, et cetera. I'm an ex-VC funded founder myself. I've bootstrapped to more than $1 million in revenue. And today I get the pleasure of talking with Paul, who I have known since 2020. Paul, I think we launched a campaign together on the day that lockdown commenced.
I remember that very well, Jamie. I can remember the ticker tape running at God knows how many millions, etc., for lockdown to be called, and that all sort of going to the wall. Yeah, I wouldn't say it was an unsuccessful campaign. I think it was successful, but it wasn't really as successful as it could have been. And I think we have due reason for that. Lockdown being called on the day that we start to get into this thing was an interesting experience for us both.
For sure, for sure. So, obviously, I know your background, and you started by launching eBay Wines, which was, innovative for the wine industry in particular. But now you're obviously in beer. So, do you want to share a little bit about your background and why we are where we are today?
Sure. Look, eBay Wine was an interesting project. I was invited in I would guess you would describe it as a consultant director, to bring to them the wine world and at the same time structure the business so that it could begin to sell wine. Now, let's jump forward just a little bit. We got that business to selling a single unit of wine every 2 seconds. So it really was quite incredibly successful. But in eBay terms, whilst I'd structured in the UK and I structured it worldwide, they were having delivery problems. They were having sort of issues that were out of my control, and ultimately they shut the business after about 3 years, which was a great shame actually, because it was terribly successful in its first instance. I mean, anyone would like to sell a product every 2 seconds of every waking hour, so I wouldn't consider it a failure, but I think wine and eBay wasn't a natural fit. From there, we began to look at the environment that we're in at the moment. We were looking at diabetes, we were looking at obesity, and we were looking at what we could do to help that. I have parents that are both sort of diabetics, and I really, really wanted to help in the first instance. I really had to sort of go to the wall with all of the international winemakers that I'd made friends with over the years, the Chef de Cave at Veuve Clicquot and varying other businesses, to understand how I might be able to crack the code of zero sugar and zero carbs within wine. And it took me approximately 18 months and approximately £750,000 of our own funding to do that. Now, the good side of that is that business built to £100 million market capital business. It's in 15 countries around the world, 800 stores of Tesco for 5 years flat in the UK, and all under my stewardship. A man is only as good as what he does today, not as good as what he did yesterday. And I sold out of those businesses approximately a year ago. The reason I did that is I'd seen what I think is a much, much larger opportunity, when again we were looking at where obesity and diabetes really play very hard, and of course that's in men and that's in beer, in really, really simple terms. I mean, after all, you've never heard of a wine gut. It's always a beer gut, right? And I'm not trying to be sort of funny about this. It's just a simple fact. So again, we invested from our own funds around 350,000. We worked with 3 or 4 different brewers before we cracked that code, having used some of the skill that we had in the wine business. We moved that over into beer. We launched beer last July, and again, I'm not trying to be flippant here, but we, after 10 days, had to turn off all advertising, stop any social media activity, just stop everything. Otherwise, we would have been sold out in 14 days, which, of course, given the next truck wasn't arriving for a month, would have been quite an issue. And again, that pretty much happened exactly the same with the second truck. So now we've sold 100,000 beers. I mean, it's a big number. We're a startup, but 100,000 units of anything is really, really quite impressive. If I'd done that in wine, I'd have been really, really happy. So yeah, so here we are at the moment, having done what I call the proof of concept phase. We've created the beer. And the thing about doing something that is, I guess, carb-free, sugar-free, you think of it in terms of a diet product, and of course it really, really isn't. It's a better for you, healthy lifestyle product. We're certainly not a diet product. But ultimately, to create something that is zero sugar, zero carbs, and to make it successful is about taste and it's about volume. So what I've successfully managed to do in both instances is to make sure that the ABV is equal. So we are at 4.8 for our lager and 4.6 for our session IPA. Actually, it's quite high for a session IPA.
Well, that's the big problem, isn't it, with low anything beer, is that as soon as you start taking other stuff out of it, it practically ends up a shandy.
Do you know, and that really is where the cleverness comes. That's where the grit comes. That's where the digging in comes. You know, you have to go through, I can tell you, 76 iterations of the beers. You know, constantly tasting, constantly looking at the colours, constantly looking at the ABV, constantly, you know, and it's a scary journey. You know, I would say to anyone that's you know, looking to create another sort of international startup, it really is a scary journey, and you have to really concentrate a great deal on making the product taste better than a standard lager, minus all the bad things.
Yeah, very good, very good. So the problem that you're solving now, I guess, is twofold from my perspective. It's, as you mentioned, you've never heard of a wine gut,
Never.
but it's also there's just a gap in the market. So what necessarily is that problem that it's driving you?
Well, I think if you look at the amount, okay, the problem, I'll put it into a sort of slightly comical story. So let's take 8 men that drink at a pub every day, 4 days a week, and they do that for the next 10 years. If you take the amount of sugar in weight after that 10 years, there would be another 10 men in weight standing beside them. So you see the problem very, very clearly there. You know, the industry at large doesn't want to tell you how many sugars are in a beer, but there's a lot, I can assure you of that. And we know that there are an inordinate amount of people drinking beer. It's millions and millions and millions and millions. And we want to stop the rot, if you will. So we are providing the better for you, healthier option where you can have a beer and not gain a beer gut.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense. The obvious question off the back of that, and the one that springs to mind, and I'm sure it's the one that you get sick of being asked every day, is that,
Go
okay,
ahead.
sounds great, Paul, but Heineken are just going to release a sugar-free beer. You know, what's the combat to that, and how do you sort
Yeah,
of build a moat?
and I get, and again, I think this comes and speaks to the experience that we've had before, and learning from the experiences we've had before, and doing better than we did before. So I'm very pleased to say that protection has been a huge part of what we do. We have a almost worldwide trademark wall now. So all the way through the United Kingdom, Europe, as far away as New Zealand, that is sugar-free beer by sugarfreebeer.com. It's a sort of double whammy trademark protection. So no, in simple terms, no other brewery would be able to do it. Otherwise, I say this flippantly, I'd spend my life suing breweries for a living rather than actually making beer, which might be easier in actual fact. But no, we've made sure that we're entirely protected, unlike we didn't do that with wine, and it was a mistake, and we learnt that. So yeah, we are trademark protected all the way through. In the United Kingdom, for both sugar-free and carb-free will be going around the world next. The other thing to say, and people said this in the wine industry as well, that one of the big wines will just come in and do this. But any of the big wine companies are a conglomerate; they're owned by something major, or a major business. Forgive me. And again, they would pass that down to a line manager. A line manager would cost it. And the line manager would come in and say, well, that's going to cost us £1 million, etc., etc. And at that stage, to be absolutely frank, in my business experience, it's probably easier to buy the competition than it is to do it yourself. And the other thing about it is people don't want to disturb their market position. And if you ask yourself all a question now, how many beers can you name? If you get to 20, I'll be really, really amazed. And not one of those 20 is going to want to change their principal offer. And that is the second reason. I would imagine, and please remember, if I didn't mention before, I put the CEO of Coca-Cola and the CFO of Diageo into my international wine business. So I've got good intelligence, and again, if you look at Diageo are much, much more likely to come in and say, right, we'd like a piece of this, rather than try to fight it, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, 100%. And as I said at the top of the show, I worked with you on your first campaign back in 2020, and something that struck me back then, you were never really bothered about competition. Whilst, yes, you've got a good oversight of the market, you were ruthlessly focused on the wine business. And quite funny, but I saw someone posted a sort of like a Tesco top 10 wines from, this healthy category, and they were celebrating because they were in number 2 or 3. But, guess what was in number 1 3 years on from when we worked together? It was still Slim Wine. So, I think that is a testament to really just drilling down on your own product and making sure you get that right.
You've got to have absolute belief. You've got to have a pint of grit rather than a pint of lager. You have to be dedicatedly focused on what you believe. And I believe wholeheartedly, and so does my whole team, that, and we've proven it, by the ridiculous amount of sales through the proof of concept period, that people want a better for you beer. People from the 20s, 30s, 40s and 50s, all of them buy our beer. We are 100% 5-star rated, so that gives me comfort. I know that I got the taste right. Anyone can read the reviews. They are posted onto the website. We cannot edit them. So, it was absolutely amazing, and still is amazing, that we've been in 800 stores of Tesco for wine for 5 years. It's not the model for beer, but at the same time, we are doing way, way better with beer than we did with wine at the principal.
It was, one of the statistics is that 1 in 11 of the global adult population has diabetes, and I know that that's something that you talk about. So do you want to talk about the market size and what the actual what's that big vision for this that you see?
Look, it's very easy to overtalk a business. The market size is enormous. You've got 450 million at base level new diabetics in the world today. We're not a diabetic beer, but we are the holy grail for that piece. If you look at those that are following keto, if you're following any of your calorie controlled diets, if you're just living a healthier lifestyle and go to the gym, that covers 60% of the globe. I mean, the market is enormous. In the deck that I think most people have seen, we've put some fairly scary figures in there. I'm not going to read them out now because they're there for people to read. I'd like to think, as far as market size really talks about what we believe we will achieve, that's the only relevant factor. I think we'll get to the same valuation as wine. I think we'll get there a year quicker, and I think that's what's important to people.
Yeah, for sure. What's the next milestone for you then? It's just ramping everything up, I presume.
Yeah, this is why we're doing this raise right now. It's all very well having the protections of the trademarks, which, is a huge thing. We cannot be challenged now. So we've also had the Google Analytics documents done at director level, not your local sales agent. This was done at the top of the tree. We know where the market is. We know how much that market costs, how much that market is worth. And we're doing this fundraise so that we can do that. We did exactly the same with wine. We did a small raise right at the very beginning, but I have to tell you, I raised the same amount of money for wine as I'm looking for now before I had any wine in the bottle. This is a very different process because what I've done is gone out, done my proof of concept, proved that it will sell, created the trademarks, created the strength, created the wall of defence, and now are going to look for some funding.
For sure. And on funding, switching the conversation slightly, I know personally because, not only have I've seen it with my own eyes, you've taken funding, crowdfunding, you've had, effectively dragons, notable angel investors. You've had pretty much every single type of investment across your career, and you're an investor yourself in businesses also. How do you see the general funding market? As I mentioned at the top of the show, Ukraine-Russia invasion, pandemic, banking crisis, tech layoffs. It just seems to be a weekly, doom thread. How do you see the general climate for fundraising, and what's your take on it?
I think that's a really, really interesting question. I think that there are markets that have had nothing to invest in during the pandemic. Everything really stopped. No money was going into new businesses whatsoever. So I think there's a very, very open market there. People that are somewhat fighting for deals right now, and anybody that finds me on LinkedIn will see that I speak to the financial world across the board. So I don't think that it's a negative that we went through a lockdown where everything stopped. I think it's a positive because investors make money by investing, whether that be corporate or individual. So they haven't had anything to do for a couple of years. The general market with banking crisis, look, if we talk about the, let's call it the Silicon Valley Bank, that was an interesting situation where there was literally a run on the bank and it was unfortunate. I don't feel that we are in a negative space. We've begun to have conversations ourselves with investors, obviously. We had a very interesting one yesterday. And I asked that question, where's the market for you? And again, the answer was actually it's quite buoyant. We're actively looking for things right now. And fortunately for us, you fit into our criteria. So that's not to say that I have not to speak to 100 other people. Of course, I do need to do that. But no, I think in general, 2 years of nothing to do. There's an open market now. We're a world's first. Why not talk to me?
Yep, and that makes sense. And ultimately, as you said, investors need to invest to make money. And volatility arguably goes in their favor because it gets steeper rises and better buying opportunities. So for me personally, my analysis is that all of the bank runs, they lead into a nice sort of excuse or a nice, I'm going to give it a moment to sort of, see what happens on the global level before I make any investment decisions. But the genuine appetite to invest and the capital pools to invest, I don't believe have changed too much.
No, there's not enough banks. It's not like the last sort of major financial crisis. There's not enough banks that have had problems to I believe, to have changed the market per se. And again, my understanding of this, and certainly my own approach, is we've had 2 years of not being able to do anything, and people are hunting for interesting and good deals. And again, that's through talking to people recently. That's the information, and that's the message I'm hearing.
Outside of investment and outside of your own business, again, you're a real self-starter. I know that, again, we've worked together now 3 years. You push hard in a nice way. You know what you want to achieve, and it's very different working with you as opposed to other founders who perhaps are newer and probably haven't got as much urgency to get out and get it done. Do you have advice for other entrepreneurs who are starting businesses, and anything that you sort of feel like you need to pass on?
Yeah, look, it's a very, very simple theory that I go through at the beginning. I go into a dark room and I don't come out and don't communicate with the world outside of the project that I have until it's done. It takes a very, very focused, very, very sort of hardcore approach to get anything that's innovative. So I can never get that word out of my mouth, so I won't try twice. Product onto the market, to do something unique, to do something original. My general advice, I think, only from my perspective, would be ask yourself one question, and is this original thinking? Because if it isn't, my thinking is that it's probably going to be a real struggle. But it is original thinking. You've just created a hell of a problem for yourself, because if it's original thinking, no one's thought of it before, and now you've got to convince the world that you're right. So it's a double-edged sword. I'll go back to the beginning. The only advice that I have for anyone that's going to go down this road of fighting and starting something new is you have to have a pint of grit in one hand. You have to understand that, well, it's the old elephant, story. If a problem is an elephant, how do you eat it? Well, you have to just take it one bite at a time, don't you? It doesn't matter how big the problem is, just deal with it and deal with it and deal with it and deal with it. Eventually it'll go away. Focus on the symptom, not the problem itself. But at the same time, just don't talk to anybody else. Just go dark, go focused, come out when it's done, and try to find other people around you that are similar in that approach, and try to find strength from them. Read and listen and watch people. That's the wonderful thing about today. You can find all sorts. I'm not talking about gurus here. I'm talking about other businessmen. Heini Zachariasen is one that I follow. He created the largest wine network in the world. And there are people out there that will give you solid advice as well. So dark room, one bite at a time. Take good advice. Don't come out until it's done.
Yeah, another thing that's great advice. And another thing that, again, is more observational about you. I speak with other founders, and it's kind of like, okay, this is where we are today, and we're not on pause, but we're going to go into sort of like, like a car would have a limp home mode. They kind of go into this limp home mode until someone else does something, aka an investor. When I work with you, it's always the mentality of, okay, we're doing this, the investment round, and we're going to commit to it, but it's not everything. And if it doesn't happen, we've got the plan and we're moving anyway. So it's more like, stop at a train and someone can get on if they want. That is different. Is that something that's intentional?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Again, you have to always have a sort of plan A, B, and C. Plan A is to find the right investor, someone that adds value to the company. It's not just about cash. It's about value. Someone that can look. You don't know what you don't know, right? So always listen to someone. And I want someone that I feel comfortable listening to, as well as taking their money. But no, it won't change anything. We can move forward. We will move forward. It's a question of much like wine, there was an opportunity to grab the market in a short period of time, and we successfully did that. And I think that's what this fundraise does for us. It gives us that opportunity to accelerate growth and then, to some extent, sort of kind of sit back just a little bit to consolidate, and make sure everything's strong. We've got all our routes to market. We understand how to get there. We understand what to do. Again, we've had a lot of experience in this space. So, yeah, I don't know whether, in general, my approach is different, but it is bloody focused, Jamie. And I know that regardless of what happens, we're going to get there, because there's if you don't have that absolute faith, how are you ever going to get there?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And like I said, I sat there at the beginning of Slim, and, it was just about getting into Tesco's, and there wasn't even the rosé or anything then. And to see where that got to is pretty cool. And, from my side of things, from the stuff that I've seen, it seems like you're on the same train track again.
Sorry to interrupt. It generally takes a year and a half to get into any superstore. That's the working lead time, a year and a half. We got into Tesco in 9 weeks.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that comes down to your character again that I spoke about. You don't really take your eye off it.
No,
but again,
how can you afford to? Look, as a CEO, you work for the board, you work for the investors, so it is your job to make things happen. And that is my job, and I needed, we took in notable published money from names that people know, so you work hard for that, and that's exactly what we're going to be doing with beer as well.
What do you think? Obviously, you've done wine, you're doing beer now, and in my opinion, it's going to get where you want it to go. It doesn't seem like it's got much choice. Is there anything after, or do you think this is your final go, or
no? This is it. The difference between those that invested in wine and those that will be investing in beer is wine was a UK only opportunity. This is a global opportunity. So it's going to take an awful lot of management. I'm going to be doing the sort of global CEO role, whereas I put other people in to do it internationally on wine. So no, this is the next 10 years of my life, no question about it. And no, Jamie, I won't be doing another one after that.
That's good to know. Well, Paul, I think, apart from the cliche questions, I think we've covered everything. We've gone through the fundraising round and sort of the inspiration behind the business. So for anybody watching this, I obviously urge you to reach out to Paul yourself. And, I'm sure he'll send a can of beer if anyone wants to challenge its taste or quality. Because
please challenge me.
Yeah. I mean, how many taste tests is it now that you've done?
Well, just to understand what they are professional blind tastings, and we do them in Italy, and it's 4 from 4 against the best-selling beers in Italy. They are very, very good beers. You won't tell any difference. Don't go when you drink it, just drink it. Don't be sort of sitting there looking at it and thinking about it. That's, you're always going to find a problem there. The best thing to do is for me to just give you a glass when you're not thinking about it and drink it. And you'll drink it just as happily as you will drink any other beer. And that much I'm completely confident now.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Paul. I appreciate the chat. And I look forward to catching up soon.
All right, Jamie. Take care. Bye-bye.